Welcome to the Wardrill Faction Dossier. My name is Sarv, and if you follow the weekly meta report, this is its sibling show. The weekly report covers the whole field in one pass. The Dossier picks one faction and goes as deep as the data lets us. The players, the lists, who they actually played into, and what the math says about all of it. A quick personal note before we start. I am a huge fan of the Imperial Guard, and I am giddy that I get to show off my Lord Solar on the thumbnail. He belongs to my Ultramar Planetary Defense Force, a painting project I have been chipping away at for a while. However, that being said, I will admit that I do not campaign with Guard on the table very often, so I have no horse in this race as a player, although I do understand the army more than others. That matters this week, because today's faction is at the center of the loudest argument in the game right now, the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard. A big-name channel put Guard in A tier for 11th edition. A lot of Guard players took that as an insult, and then two of them went 5-0 at the same time last weekend. So which is it? Are Guards secretly strong, or is the win rate telling the truth? We are going to look at every number I have and try to answer that honestly, without picking a team. The usual honesty first. All of this is BCP data, grand tournaments of 5 rounds or more, and the edition is only 3 weekends old. Guard give us 55 lists, a smaller sample than the big factions, so hold every trend a little looser than usual. And one bit of housekeeping. I read a lot of player names on this show, straight off the tournament software. If I mangle yours, I apologize in advance. Correct me in the comments and I will get it right next time. Let's open the dossier. The health check, and this is where the argument really starts. 55 Guard lists out of 1,788 so far. The win rate across 284 games sits at 43.6%, and that ranks 28th of the 31 factions in the data. So on our numbers, to date, Guard are near the bottom of the table. That is the number the angry half of the internet is pointing at, and it is a fair number to point at. 16 of the 55 lists finished with a winning record, 3 of them podiumed, and 2 took an outright event win. Hold on to those 2 event wins because they are the whole story today. Now the trend, and I want to give you the honest shape of it. The opening weekend, June 20th, 2 lists, noise, ignore it. June 27th, 13 lists, 46%. July 3rd, 3 lists, back down to just under 37. July 4th, 13 lists, the low point of the whole window at 32%. And then the newest weekend, July 11th, 24 lists, and it climbs to 47.5. That is the number I called the 48, below the line in the weekly report, and it is Guard's best weekend of the edition. Still under the 50% that GW treats as balanced, but the strongest showing yet, and it is the weekend both of today's 5-0 finishes landed on. One more note for calibration, and it cuts the other way. If you follow the public trackers, you have probably seen Guard quoted lower than my number, down around 31% for the same stretch. That gap is real, and it is mostly about filters. Those trackers pull a wider, rawer pool. I show a tighter, GT grade slice. I am going to air my number with my window all the way through this episode. Just know the public figure reads lower, and neither of us is lying. So let's actually have the argument, because it is a good one, and both sides are making real points. Here's what happened. A major strategy channel, Art of War, ranked every army for 11th edition, and put Guard in A tier. If you only saw the tier graphic, that looks absurd next to a 43% win rate, and a lot of the Guard community reacted hard. The case against the ranking is straightforward, and mostly correct on the facts. The overall win rate is bad. The example list that got shown around had legality questions attached to it, and the wins that do happen come from a very specific kind of build that most players do not own. 3 units of this, a wall of that, expensive kits stacked into one SKU. Now the case for the ranking presented fairly because it is stronger than the graphic makes it look. Art of War were explicit about their criteria. They rank armies by what the best players in the world can win with, using the strongest possible list played correctly. That is a real and defensible way to rate a game, because you generally balance a competitive game around top play rather than around the average table. And by that lens, look what happened the very next weekend. Two Guard players went 5-0 at the same time with lists that look nothing like a 10th edition Guard army. So the graphic and the win rate are measuring two different things, which is why they only look like they disagree. One is asking what the ceiling looks like in expert hands. The other is asking what happens when a normal person picks the army up. Both answers are true at once, and I think the honest version of this whole fight is that a faction can have a high ceiling and a broken floor at the same time. Hold that thought. We are going to go through both 5-0 lists in detail later, and I'm going to ask you a real question at the end about how much the ceiling should count. Inside the faction, here's how the 55 list split up by detachment, and the split itself is part of the argument. First, the spine. Almost every serious Guard list is built on Designation Force, the detachment that turns a chosen enemy unit into a marked target the whole army shoots better into. It shows up under a stack of different second detachments, so think of it as the chassis the faction is bolted to. Now watch the win rates, because this is the community's whole point in one chart. The most populated build, Designation Force paired with Steel Hammer, 11 lists, sits at 33%. The next one down, the Grizzled Company detachment, 9 lists at 40%. Designation Force with Hammer of the Emperor, 6 lists, 48, closer to respectable. So the popular, ownable, sensible Guard armies are all sitting below the line. And then the two that actually won a trophy last weekend. Designation Force plus Siege Regiment, the Melta and Las Cannon infantry list, 2 lists, 70%. And the Recon Element detachment, the fast scouting build, 2 lists, 60%. Look at those sample sizes though, 2 lists each. These are two very good players who found a very specific configuration and went undefeated with it once, with no real track record behind them yet. That is exactly what the skeptics mean when they say the wins are finicky. The engine everyone plays, Designation Force into Steel Hammer, is underwater. The winning versions are low-count, high-skill tunings of the same chassis. Both of today's champion lists are built on Designation Force or its scouting cousin, and we are going to take them apart piece by piece. Zoom out from the detachment labels, and the 55 lists collapse into a few real army ideas. Build 1, the Infantry Control Gun Line, and this is the one that won last weekend. A field of cheap troops and scouts to hold ground, Acadian brick with a castle attached, and behind them a wall of las cannons in Catachan and Krieg heavy weapon squads. It scores, it screens, and it slowly shoots the board off the table. Both 5-0 lists are versions of this. Build 2, the Mechanized Assault, the classic Guard tank list. Lord Solar Leontis, Rogaldorn battle tanks, Kasserkin in chimeras, a Hellhound burning down infantry. This is the army most people picture when they think Guard, and it is sitting right in the middle of the pack. Our Review 3 is one of these, and it came within a single point of the whole thing. Build 3, the Armor Skew proper, the super heavy list with a Baneblade or a Shadow Sword anchoring everything. Exciting, expensive, and streaky. And Build 4, the Abhuman and Specialist builds, Bulgrin Walls, Ogren Bricks, the odd Atalan Cavalry list. Here is the honest through line. The winning shell right now is a patient infantry list that hides behind bodies and deletes you with massed las cannons. It asks you to play recon and board control while your opponent runs out of targets. A long way from the tank army people love or the super heavy people fear. That is a very particular way to play, and it is a big reason the floor and the ceiling are so far apart. Now the units, and this is the table I would screenshot if you are building Guard this month. The auto includes first, Cadian shock troops are in 55% of lists, the cheap objective holders every list wants. And, like most auto includes, they carry a middling 46% because everyone runs them, so they cannot separate winners from losers. Scout Sentinels in the Cadian Command Squad are in about half of all lists each, both sitting right around 50. Read past those. The unit I would actually circle is Gaunt's Ghosts. in 38% of lists, and the lists running them win at 56%, the best carrier number of any common unit in the faction. That little veteran kill team keeps turning up in the winning lists. Right behind it, and this is the tell for the whole episode, the Cadian Recon Squad. Only in an eighth of lists, but a 58% carrier rate, the highest on the board. The lists that lean into scouting and board control are the lists that win. Now the warning labels, and they are the ones that will surprise people. Kasserkin, the elite hotshot veterans, in 27% of lists and carrying just 36%. The Rogel Dorn battle tank, the big, beautiful centerpiece, 260 points, in 42% of lists, and it drags at 40. And Lord Solar Leontis himself, the faction's marquee character, is in a third of lists at 43. None of those are bad units, but the data is quietly saying the same thing over and over. The expensive, marquee pieces are underperforming, and the cheap scouting infantry is overperforming. Everything else is on your screen. Guard look like a horde game, but the winning lists lean on a handful of leader attachments, and it is worth knowing what each one actually hands the squad. The most repeated attachment, 16 times over, is a Militarum Tempestus command squad joining Tempestus Scions, and the reason is the Tempestor Prime inside it. While he rides along, every gun in the squad gains sustained hits, so the package that deep strikes in lands its damage the turn it arrives. Then the Cadian Corps. A Cadian command squad leading Cadian shock troops gives that block an officer to carry an order every turn, and its Cadia Stands rule lets the brick reroll battle shock while it holds an objective. In the two winning lists, a Cadian Castellan joins that same brick, and his senior officer rule hands all 20-odd guns sustained hits, turning that wall of lasguns into real output. And the marquee move, Lord Solar Leontis riding into the shock trooper brick, turns that objective block into the command node, issuing up to 3 orders a turn and banking a command point. A Krieg command squad on a Death Corps blob brings grim determination, which keeps orders and stratagems working on that trench wall even after it fails a battle shock test. Notice who is not topping this list. There is no single hero and bodyguard combo carrying the faction the way the big characters do in other armies. Guard win through a lot of small, cheap attachments layered across a wide board. If you use the Wardrill app, here is my honest tip for the week. Run the leader attachment drills on the command squad into Scions and the Castellan into shock troops pairs. Knowing exactly what each attached character hands the squad without checking 3 cards mid-turn is free percentage. Matchups. This is every guard game we captured so far, all event sizes. So a wider net than the GT table, and the best picture we have this early. And this chart is the other half of why the win rate is where it is. Start with the green, and be honest about how little of it there is. The best lane with real games behind it is the Grey Knights matchup, 52% over 27 games. The Guard mirror sits just above even, and Sisters of Battle too, but on tiny samples. That is essentially the whole list of matchups Guard win. Everything else is at or below the line. Now the red, and this is where the hard target problem lives. Necrons, 62 games, 26%, and it is the single most played opponent Guard face. Imperial Knights, 36 games, 25%. Chaos Space Marines, 44 games, 25%. 3 of the biggest samples on the board, all sitting around 1 win in 4. Look at what those 3 armies have in common. A Knight is a wall of tough wounds. A Necron army leans on the Catan and reanimating bodies that refuse to die. Chaos Marines bring resilient elite infantry and demon engines. All 3 are tough enough to weather the lasguns and shrug off a lot of incoming fire. Now, here's where the easy read goes wrong. Of course the lasguns bounce off that armor. Everybody knows that walking in. The honest question is whether the rest of the Guard plan still holds up into them, because the engine on these winning lists is attrition and board control. They flood cheap bodies across every objective, while the guns clear the soft targets and stall the hard ones, and they grind the mission out over 5 rounds. So the red lanes are telling us something more specific. When the game turns into a straight fight, and the hard targets refuse to die on schedule, the attrition math stops paying guard back. There is a second piece to this. These lists are built to deny you reserves. Cheap kit like Scramblefield throws a 12-inch bubble around a unit that nothing can deep strike into, which quietly shuts down half of what a knight or a chaos army wants to do to a horde. And the guard list keeps its own deep strike in the back pocket, in the scions who drop in to kill a hard target on their terms. So, when you hear that a guard player went 5-0, the very first question I want to ask is simple. Who did they actually play? Because if a guard list never had to walk into a knight, a Catan, or a demon engine all weekend, that changes what the record means. Keep that in your pocket. We are about to check exactly that for both of our winners. Calc Corner. These are the guns off today's list into targets they actually faced. Round 2 for Tucker was Joe Pollard's armor-heavy Dark Angels, with 2 Gladiator Lancers and a Repulsor. One buffed Catachan heavy weapon squad into a Gladiator Lancer averages 6.6 damage, a little over half of its 12 wounds. The mechanism is the Lancer's lack of an invulnerable save, which lets the las cannons press its 3+ armor. Rounds 1 and 5 both put Terminator Assault squads across from Tucker. Send 1 full Melta Scion package into 5 of them, and the engine averages 12.5 damage, or about 3.7 Terminators, with a 29% chance to clear the squad. The 4+ invulnerable save is the whole story there, and it leaves the last model standing in most runs. Nemo's round 4 was Alex Vion's Dark Angels vehicle saturation, including 3 Landspeeder Vengeance units. 1 Catachan Lascannon squad averages 5.5 damage into a Vengeance, and 1 Krieg squad averages 4.4. Put 1 of each onto the same 10-wound chassis, and their expected damage reaches about 10. The mechanism is redundancy. Nemo brought 6 of those Lascannon squads into a field of medium vehicles, and all of these are floor numbers, because the stratagems sit on top. At 12 inches, 1 command point for Flare Burst pushes Tucker's full Cadian brick from 6.8 to 8 expected damage into those Terminators, and both lists carry Krieg Engineers whose 0 command point explosives roll 6 dice at 4+ for an average of 3 more mortal wounds. My read is that the same battery that clears 10 to 12 wound vehicles is what bounces off Knights and Catan, and neither run had to face those. Now flip the table around, because the other half of guard math is what the trade costs. Alex Vion's Vengeance averages 9.2 damage into Nemo's Krieg gun team in the open. Put that team in terrain, as guard gun lines are, and cover cuts it to 8.1, with the wipe chance falling from 78% to 62%. In melee, it is uglier. Bryce Bennett's 5 Terminators and Canuck Var wipe 20 Cadians in 1 activation. But look at the receipt. That 270-point stack bought 145 points of Cadians and a turn of position, and now it is standing in the open in front of 16 las cannons and Melta Scions that average 12.5 into exactly that profile. If the stack survives, the position may pay for it. If Tucker removes it next turn, Guard finishes the exchange 125 points ahead. Attrition done right is selling bodies at a profit. This review won the first of the 2 5-0 finishes and the one that started the whole victory lap. Tucker Rickey, the Dreammaker GT, 49 players, the Designation Force and Siege Regiment build, 5-0, first place. Quick shout out before we dig in, because this one is personal. The Dreammaker GT is an Onslaught gaming event, and the 2 guys who run it, Lewis and Tim, are friends of mine. I cut my competitive teeth at their events around Orlando back in 9th and 10th edition, so the event photos you are seeing through this segment are courtesy of them. Look at the composition, because it is the infantry control idea in its purest form. 2 big blocks of scoring infantry, a 20 model Cadian shock brick with a Castellan and command squad attached, and a death corps of Krieg blob. Ursula Creed, Gaunt's Ghosts, and Lord Marshal Dreer for utility, 2 squads of Melta-armed Scions to drop in and kill hard targets, a couple of Cadian recon squads to scout and control ground, and a squad of Death Riders on top of that. Those Death Riders are Krieg Lancers on horseback, a cavalry unit most armies in the game never get to field, and their reactive 6-inch move lets them dart out to body block a charge or steal a late objective, which rewards a player who has put in the reps with them. And then the teeth. 16 las cannons spread across 3 Catachan heavy weapon squads and 2 Krieg squads. There is no artillery in this list. There is no super heavy. It is bodies, board control, and a wall of anti-tank. Now the complement. This list solves the guard problem by refusing to give you targets, screening and holding while 16 las cannons and Melta Scions delete whatever comes forward. And the detachments earn their keep. Designation Force lets a Scout Sentinel mark an enemy each turn, adding 3 inches of detection range against it, so hiding from the las cannons gets harder. Siege Regiment is the honest surprise. Its artillery support rule needs no artillery datasheet at all, so this all-infantry list can still slow advancing units or strip their cover every round. And Eager Advance hands the 20 model brick a scout move up the board. And the critique, which is really the question we keep circling. This is a hard list to pilot, and it is a specific answer to a specific kind of game. It wants to score while dying slowly and shoot you off the board. Against the wrong opponent, an army that just laughs at massed las cannons and walks up the table, that plan can stall. So the 5-0 is only half the story. The real test is who he actually pointed it at. Before the round by round, here's how scoring even works this edition because it drives everything Tucker did. In 11th edition, both players lock a force disposition with their list, and the 2 dispositions together deal the primary mission for that game off a matrix. So Tucker locked Disruption for the weekend, and each opponent's disposition decided which mission the 2 of them actually played. 3 of his 5 opponents brought priority assets, and Disruption into priority assets deals Locate and Deny, so learn that one mission and you understand most of his tournament. It pays 4 ways. You score for killing an enemy unit that began its turn on an objective. You score for being the only army left in an Operation Marker's terrain with nobody contesting it. You score for holding an objective away from your home from the second round on. And at the end, you score once more for that last marker condition. Now watch who does each job. His 2 Cadian recon squads infiltrate up and hold the operation markers. Cheap line infantry and engineers sit on the non-home objective. Gaunt's Ghosts and the Death Riders are the reactive layer. And the 16 las cannons make the middle of the table a place nothing crosses alive, so all those little scoring units keep breathing. That mission wants you in many places at once, and an army of cheap independent units can service many jobs at the same time. 2 rounds bent the shape. Round 3 was the Disruption Mirror, Disruption into Disruption, which deals Outmaneuver, a mission that pays more each round for objectives away from home, and a big bonus for standing on the enemy's home objective, a job his forward recon and redeploying ghosts are built for. Round 4 was Disruption into Purge the Foe, which deals delaying action, kills plus the center and an expansion point, and it ties straight to the matchups. Rounds 1 and 5 were Terminator Walls. Round 2 was Armor. Round 4 was Battlesuits. One structure answered all 3. The las cannons and Melta delete the expensive thing, while the swarm of cheap bodies keeps scoring. The secondary deck pays this shape just as well. 3 cards score off raw unit count alone: Engage on All Fronts, Display of Might, and Burden of Trust, and a list carrying 20-odd separate units keeps a presence in every table quarter, outnumbers most armies in the middle of the board, and has a spare body to guard each objective, so all three are close to free income on top of the primary. We did not get to watch this guard savant play a single one of these games. His primary scoring and the way the list is built are the whole record, so let me intelligently presume how this worked on the table and treat it as an educated read rather than a replay. 1 shell, 3 problems, 5 wins. Here's how Tucker's weekend actually went, round by round, because this is the run the whole A-tier argument hangs on. Round 1, Dark Angels, 100 to 43, comfortable. A Terminator-heavy list, and the roster gave him high AP las cannons and Melta for its 2+ saves. Round 2, more Dark Angels, 100 to 20, a blowout. This one was armor-heavy, with Gladiator Lancers and a Repulsor for his 16 las cannons and Melta Scions to attack. Round 3, Thousand Suns, 98 to 97, into Sekitar robots and demon engines that his distributed anti-armor could threaten. His opponent there was Mike Muzzini, an Art of War player himself and Tucker's teammate on that roster. I will flag this as speculation, but teammates drill together, and it would not surprise me if the two of them had practiced this exact matchup. Round 4, Tau Empire, 100 to 55, into 2 Riptides and a Storm Surge that his long-range las cannons could contest. Round 5, for the trophy, Space Marines, 100 to 90, a Terminator and vehicle build his las cannon density could answer across every armor band. 4 of 5 games capped at 100. It is a dominant, well-earned 5-0. Now the honest part, and it is the whole ceiling argument in one weekend. He faced 2 Dark Angels, Thousand Suns, Tau, and Space Marines, and he missed all 3 nightmare lanes on our chart: Necrons, Imperial Knights, and Chaos Space Marines. Here is the piece I do not want to slide past. Take the field's own record into those same factions, meaning the whole pool of mostly average Guard players. Guard win about 37 games in 100 into Dark Angels, and he drew them twice. Around 42 into Thousand Suns, 40 into Tau, 35 into Space Marines. Every one of those is a losing lane for the ordinary Guard pilot, most of them close to 2 defeats for every win, and Tucker capped 4 of the 5 anyway. That is what a tier list is trying to point at. The field drowns in these matchups, and a top-flight player walks through them. I will only say it that plainly once. Nobody picks their pairings, and you can only beat who the bracket gives you, but it still matters for what the record proves. Tucker played the infantry control list beautifully, and the run was dominant without being untouched. 2 of these games went to the wire, the 1-point win over Muzzini in round 3 and the 10-point trophy game in round 5, while the other 3 were runaways. He proved that this list is lethal in the right hands on the right table. A weekend with a Catan or a Knight remains unanswered. Now the posture, because I promised we would check it. All 3 of his locate and deny games sat on one pairing, his disruption into their priority assets, and across nearly 1,000 recorded games, that pairing runs dead even, a hair under 50%. No edge either way, for him or the man across the table. The round 3 mirror against Muzzini has no number at all, and his Purge the Foe game in round 4 is even 2, just under 50 over more than 1,000 games. So nothing about this weekend was won at the matchup screen. If anything, the read runs the gentle way for him. The priority assets player gets the more familiar mission, while Disruption hands Tucker the scattered marker and kill jobs his cheap squads happen to love, and even that is a mission fit the Matrix does not reward with a single point of win rate. The credit here is the list and the pilot. The posture was a coin flip. Review 2 is the other 5-0 from the same weekend, and here is what makes it fascinating. Nemo the Fish, widely regarded as the best Guard player in the world, at the Western Wisconsin Wargaming Weekend, 26 players, the Recon Element Detachment, 5-0, first place. And this is the resume you are looking at. This is the man who won the Las Vegas Open with a Recon Element Horde north of 180 models, and by every public report, he did not lose a single game the whole event. Let me put that in perspective. I tried a mass infantry Guard list at a local event exactly once. By the end of round 2, I was mentally hungover from picking up and moving 90-odd models a turn, and I still had 3 rounds to go. Nemo does that for 5 rounds and wins the event. Nemo is not human. That is probably why the man hides behind a fish name. Put his list next to Tucker's, and they are almost the same army. Same 20 model Cadian Brick with the Castellan and Command Squad. Same Gaunt's Ghost, same Ursula Creed, same Lord Marshal Dreer, same Death Corps Blob, same Catachan Lascannon squads. 2 very good players at 2 different events arrived at nearly the same list independently. That convergence is a signal. This is the guard skew, and the field is starting to find it. Now the differences, because they are the interesting part. Nemo went further on the scouting theme. 3 Cadian recon squads instead of 2. 3 Krieg Lascannon squads instead of 2. 19 Lascannons in total. And his scions carry hot-shot volley guns instead of Melta, trading some anti-tank punch for more mid-range volume and bodies. And here, the detachment is the whole point. Recon Elements Masters of Camouflage gives every regiment and walker model the benefit of cover, and a better save when they already stand in terrain. So Nemo's cheap 3 toughness Lascannon teams sit in permanent cover and are hard to shift. Cheap tools like Scramblefield keep deep strikers from dropping near those guns, and his 3 Cadian recon squads carry the scouting identity out front. The complement is the same as Tucker's with one addition. This is arguably the more refined version of the idea, tuned even harder towards score and control rather than raw killing. The critique is the same too. It is a demanding list that wants a particular kind of game, and the same question applies. Who did he actually have to beat to go undefeated? Nemo's scoring runs on the same mechanic as Tucker's beat, his reconnaissance disposition meeting each opponent's disposition, and the pair dealing the mission. Nemo locked reconnaissance, and every mission it dealt him rewards one thing, being spread across the board. 2 opponents brought Take and Hold, and reconnaissance into Take and Hold deals reconnaissance sweep. 2 brought Priority Assets, and reconnaissance into Priority Assets deals Search and Scour. And the mounted game in round 4 was the Reconnaissance Mirror, reconnaissance into reconnaissance, which deals Gather Intel. Reconnaissance Sweep pays 3 points for holding 3 of the 4 table quarters, or 6 for all 4, as long as those units stay out of the middle, plus a point for each enemy unit killed, and 3 for a non-home objective. Search and Scour, which he drew twice, pays for the center, for killing something that started its turn in terrain, for objectives away from home, and for clearing the enemy out of your own half by the end. Gather Intel pays for the center early, for units carrying intelligence off the board, and for planting operation markers deep. Every one of those is a job you win by having more separate pieces than the other guy. Look at the counts. In round 2, his opponent brought 40 models in 14 units, an elite marine list. Nemo brought 147 models in 24 units. An elite army cannot stand in 4 quarters and hold the center and contest your markers all at once, because it does not have the bodies to be in that many places. Nemo does. And the piece that makes it work is Masters of Camouflage, which parks every cheap regiment model in permanent cover, so the scoring skeleton does not get shot off the board while it spreads. The hardest version came in round 4, a full-mounted Dark Angels army, everything on wheels or wings, and fast enough to reach any objective on the table. Speed against board coverage. That whole army was 24 models, only 5 of them foot infantry. Speed reaches any one point. It cannot sit on all of them at once. Nemo had 3 recon squads, redeploying ghosts, and a dozen more cheap units to plant on quarters and markers, while his 19 lascannons cleared the speeders. My read is that coverage outscores speed there, and the board finished 100 to 62. And like Tucker's list, the secondary deck rewards the exact same sprawl. Engage on all fronts, display of might, and burden of trust all pay off raw unit count, and a 147 model army has the bodies to hold every quarter, own the middle, and guard each objective at once, so those cards are close to free on top of the primary. I did not watch Nemo play either. His primary scoring and the way the list is built are what I am reading, so treat this as an educated presumption rather than a replay. Nemo's run answers a critique before anyone even makes it. Round 1, Blood Angels, 100 to 53. Into Blade Guard and Ball Predators, his 19 las cannons and volley fire were built to split. And yes, ouch. Blood Angels are my army, so let me sit in that one for a second. Picture running a Flesh Tearer's strike force up the board into 147 guardsmen dug into cover, every las cannon in the county drawing a bead on your death company before they land a single charge. That is a rough day at the office. Round 2, Space Marines, 100 to 65. A heavy build of repulsor executioners and a ballistas, 3 big vehicles his las cannon backbone could threaten. Round 3, 1,000 Suns, 100 to 67. Into Scarab Occult Terminators and Sekitar robots. The elite blocks his high AP volume is tuned for. Round 4, Dark Angels, 100 to 62. This was speeder saturation, and 19 las cannons into 9 to 11 wound vehicles was his cleanest damage job. Round 5, Emperor's Children, 100 to 67, where volley guns and flamers covered the light bodies while las cannons covered the defiler. Nemo hit 100 in all 5 rounds, with a 33-point smallest margin. That is a demolition, and it also answers the mirror match critique. His opponents were Blood Angels, Space Marines, 1,000 Suns, Dark Angels, and Emperor's Children, with 0 guard mirrors. And look at what the field does with that exact spread. Across the whole pool of guard players, they win about 35 games and 100 into Blood Angels, 35 into Space Marines, 42 into 1,000 Suns, 37 into Dark Angels, and 37 into Emperor's Children. 5 lanes, and the average guard pilot is an underdog in every one of them. Nemo went to 100 points in all 5. It is the same shape as Tucker's Weekend, the ceiling in miniature. The field sinks in these matchups, and the best guard player alive tops the scoreboard in each. Both undefeated guard players also missed Necrons, Imperial Knights, and Chaos Space Marines, the faction's 3 worst lanes. Those wins stand. The 2 weekends still leave the armies that break this plan unanswered. Same caveat as Tucker's run applies. Now the posture. His 2 reconnaissance sweep games both came off 1 pairing, his reconnaissance into their take and hold, which sits right about even, a shade under 50 over a few hundred games. His 2 search and scour games were the other pairing, reconnaissance into priority assets, even as well, just under 50 over more than 500. And round 4 was the reconnaissance mirror against Vian, which has no cell to speak of. So it is the same story as Tucker. Not one of his 5 games handed him a posture edge, and not one handed his opponents one either. The mission jobs suit an army built to sprawl, and I will read them that way, while the credit stays with the list in the man moving 147 models a turn. Review 3 is the other side of the coin, and it is the one I think teaches the most, because the loudest fact about Guard right now is 2 5-0 finishes, and the quietest fact is a player who took a completely different Guard army almost all the way, the classic way, and lost the whole event by a single point. Gregory Moxley, the EI Commencing Armageddon Kickoff GT, 30 players, the Designation Force and Mechanized Assault build on Purge the Foe, 4-1, second place. This is the Tank Army. Lord Solar Leontis, a Rogaldorn battle tank, a Hellhound, 3 squads of Kasserkin riding in Chimeras and Toroxes, Sly Marbo, Atalan Rough Riders and Death Riders for speed. Where our 2 winners hide behind bodies and las cannons, Moxley drives armor up the table and burns you down. It is the Guard list most players actually own and love. And here is why it is in the episode. It went toe-to-toe with the entire event and came up 1 point short in a game against the eventual champion. If you watch the Space Marines dossier, you already know that champion. It is Chris Cardamone, the Hammer of Averni Terminator wall that won that whole event. Moxley's Guard tanks took the overall winner to 79 to 80 and lost by a single point. Same game told from both sides across 2 dossiers. The tank army is far from broken. It came a coin flip away from beating the best list in the room. That is the tension in this whole faction in 1 match. Moxley's rounds are the counterweight to the 2 victory laps. Round 1, Chaos Demons, 86 to 65. Round 2, 1,000 Suns, 95 to 88, a 7-point game. Round 3, more Chaos Demons, 94 to 86. He is 3-0 and grinding out close ones the hard way. Round 4, the game of the weekend. Chris Cardamone's Space Marines, the list that would win the whole event at 5-0. 79-80. Moxley loses the eventual champion by 1 single point. That purge pairing generated Destroyer's Wrath, paying for a kill, a non-home objective, holding more, and winning the trade. Moxley's mobile tanks and Cardamone's durable Terminator wall could both score those jobs, which fits a 1-point game. And here's a small thing that fits the result almost too well. That pairing, his Purge the Foe into Cardamone's priority assets, is about as close to a genuinely even, deep sample matchup as this game offers. 50.8% over more than 1,500 recorded games. A coin flip on paper, and it finished 79-80. In round 5, he dusts himself off and beats a Space Wolves list 100-87 to lock up second. Sit with that. A classic guard tank army, the ownable one, the one that is supposedly the problem, went 4-1 at a real GT and came within 1 point of beating the best list in the building. That is the ceiling and floor argument in a single tournament. On our chart, this exact style, the mechanized build, sits mid-pack, and the popular detachment shells are underwater at 33%. And yet, here's a player driving that middling archetype to a 1-point loss against the champion. Both things are true. The average guard tank list is struggling, and a great pilot can take one to the doorstep of winning it all. The mission fit here is only a read about the jobs, and as we just saw, the posture was a coin flip that came down by a single point. 3 players, 1 faction, 1 weekend of data. 2 dominant winners who never had to walk into the hard lanes, and 1 near miss who ran the popular army and lost by a point to the best in the room. Now the question is what all of that adds up to. So here is the real question, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments because I do not think there is a clean one. How should we judge an army? Art of War put Guard in A tier because the best players with the best list can win a tournament, and last weekend 2 of them did. That is true. Our data says the faction wins under 44% of its games and loses 3 of its most common matchups at a 1-4 clip. That is also true. So which number is the army? Is a faction A tier if only the top 1% of players running 1 expensive SKU list into the right bracket can win with it? Or does a healthy army have to be more than 1 build deep and winnable for the person who just likes Guard and wants to bring their tanks? And here is why the answer matters. Judging an army by its best pilots can bury the very number that argues it needs help from Games Workshop. And if the ceiling is the story we tell, the fix never comes. I lean one way, you might lean the other, and I think it is a genuinely open question about what a tier list is even for. Tell me below. While you are down there, a like and a subscribe genuinely move the needle for a channel this size. And everything you saw today, the win rates, the matchup lanes, the damage math, lives in the Wardrill app, refreshed every week. Paste your own list in, and the same engine that ran our Calc Corner will tell you exactly what your las cannons kill and what shrugs them off. To my Patreon supporters, you are why a one-person stat show gets to exist. Thank you. Before I sign off, let me try something new for this show. Instead of handing you 3 predictions, I'm setting 3 tripwires. Each one is a specific number with a line drawn on it, so when we come back for the next Guard Dossier, the data grades itself, cleanly, one way or the other. Tripwire 1 is about pilotability. We already know the list is strong. The open question is whether a human being can actually pilot a 150 model army on a chess clock for 5 rounds without falling apart. 2 players did it last weekend. My honest read leans against it. Most players, and I include myself, cannot push 150 models on a clock, so I do not expect the field to copy this. But here's the line, and the data can overrule me. If this SKU makes up about 1/3 of Guard's winning list appearances by the next Dossier, it is the real deal and people can pilot it. If it stays a rare spike, it was 2 great pilots on a great weekend. And this is where you come in. Be honest in the comments. Could you run 150 models under a tournament clock for 5 rounds? I will read the room next time. Tripwire 2 is the win rate. The popular detachments are underwater, and I will price this read at 60-40, no better. My read is the to-date number climbs toward the mid-40s as players learn the skew and stalls under 50 without a points change from Games Workshop. The line is simple. If guard clear 50% over a 200-game sample with no points change, my read was wrong, full stop. Tripwire 3 is the hard lanes, and I am hedging this one on purpose because the samples are thin. Necrons, Knights, and Chaos Marines are all sitting around a quarter win rate on 36 to 62 games each. That is a lean rather than a law. Here's the line. If any of those three climbs past roughly 40% on a bigger sample, the early number was small sample noise, and I will say so. 3 tripwires, 3 lines. Check back next dossier and see which one's tripped. One more before the credits, and it is a local one. The same crew behind those Dreammaker photos, Onslaught Gaming, is running a 2-day GT on the 15th and 16th of August at Layton Gaming in Altamont Springs, Florida. 5 rounds across the weekend. Lewis and Tim put on a genuinely good event. I have played their tables for years, and if you are anywhere near Central Florida, this is a weekend worth booking. Details are in the description. One last thing before the dossier closes. Thank you to my Patreons, and especially our Magos operators, the names on your screen right now. You keep the Cogitator running, and shows like this one exist because of you. Thank you. That is the Astra Militarum faction dossier in the books. Guard, near the bottom of the table on our numbers at just under 44%, 28th of 31, and at the exact same time the Army 2 players took to a 5-0 last weekend. A high ceiling in expert hands, a hard floor for everyone else, a winning shell built on cheap bodies and massed las cannons, and 3 brutal lanes in Necrons, Knights, and Chaos Marines. To the pilots we covered, Tucker Rickey, Nemo The Fish, and Gregory Moxley, who came a single point from the whole thing, and everyone marching the guard in the early data, good hunting and thank you for the data. And genuinely, tell me in the comments how you would judge this army, because I meant that question. This show is an experiment and you are the playtesters. The models throughout were my own Ultramar Guard, a hobby project, still a few tanks short of a full muster. Next up, the weekly meta report drops as always, and the Orcs dossier is on the way. As always, the data shows you what is winning. Reps on the table are what make it yours. This is Sar from Wardrill, signing out. See you at the next transmission.